Hello and welcome. Today we're going to talk about glorious colors. Colors in music photography. And I do absolutely love colors at a concert. And I do shoot a lot of shows that have really elaborate, very beautiful stage design and light design. And colors play a huge part of this. And I'm really thrilled that I can actually document this. Modern digital cameras are quite spectacular at this. I especially love my Fujifilm cameras for the color rendition. And I'm going to show you how I'm shooting at ISO 12800 and it still produces really good colors. I'm going to take you through my Lightroom workflow as well. I'm going to show you how to tame, how to rescue those really saturated lights, those LED lights that can really sort of color an entire image blue or red. So if you look at my portfolio, you will see a lot of color work. And to me, the colors at concerts, they add an emotional depth to it. They also add an actual depth to the image with the foreground and background separation that you cannot always get with a black and white image. So I truly love color photography at concerts. Let's look at some examples. Now, the best part for me really is when you get an image that really looks kind of nice straight out of camera. I don't really enjoy sitting and working in Lightroom for hours. I'd rather be out shooting, especially the year 2020. I really would rather be out shooting, but we cannot. So, plenty of time to play around with Lightroom. And if you look at an image like this is straight out of camera, and this is my version of it. So I've really done very little to it. I really enjoy that when you can get it right like this in camera. I just cropped it and added a bit of contrast and a bit of clarity, and that's pretty much all I've done to it. I will show you on this particular image the workflow, the very easy workflow for getting a nicely lit image like this one to my final product, this one. And then I will also show you how you get some of the crazy images to look nice. But let's do the easy one first. So this one, I look at it and go, that is very nicely lit. That is a beautiful production, and I don't have to do a lot to it really. I'm just going to start out by going to the develop mode, of course, and I'm going to start from the top. Now, I have the benefit of different camera profiles such as classic chrome. So if we take this back to Adobe color, it's pretty much the same. I just have some camera profiles from Fujifilm that have all this brilliant color technology in them, so I can emulate all these different films, and it gets me a faster starting point. But let's just start at Adobe color, because that's also fine. We just need to do a bit more work. I look at it and go, that's quite nice. Let's look at the white balance. I find it is perhaps a little bit on the warm side, and that's because I can see all of these like mobile lights out here. And I know they're quite cold in color temperature compared to the very warm spot here. And that means I would like some separation. I would like this to kind of remain warm, and I would like the background to kind of cool a bit, because it will just make a nicer separation in the image. And you can do this by simply cooling the color temperature just a little bit. Like that. See, you already kind of brought out the blue here. And this is still nicely orange warm. So we have more separation. The colors add a nice layer of separation, especially if you can go from cold to warm. And then we go down the list here. And again, I want to say these are all just names for different algorithms. You can take the highlights down a bit or up, and whites just kind of operate on a slightly smaller area of the highlights, just the very pure whites. The blacks I definitely want to take down a little bit, like that, because it's a little hazy, so it all gets a little sort of muddy, hazy. And the clarity slider can be good for that. We add a little bit of clarity to it. It also kind of brings out all the lights in the background and the audience. And like with any slider in Lightroom, you can go completely over the top, and sometimes it might be cool. But be aware, however, that this adds a shitload of noise as well, especially in the shadows. So you don't want to do too much. And if you do, you definitely want to crush those blacks to get rid of that shadow noise. Let's say we're about here. Texture is another slider. It's just kind of clarity on a smaller scale. Dehaze is sometimes very good on very hazy images. It actually works quite nicely here. You can see it also adds sort of a micro level of contrast that removes some of this haziness. Let's try a little bit of that. The vibrant slider, I prefer that to the saturation slider. They both do saturation just in different ways. Different algorithms. You could take a little bit in or to give it a little bit. Let's try and, it's actually quite nice to add a little bit. Brings out the blue and we're already kind of getting there. And of course, some of the stuff I've done up here, I could have also done with curves. It's just same tools that do different things. You can do it in different ways. So I'm just gonna add a little bit here. The light's already very bright. I don't need to add a lot of contrast. You can take even more of the black out if you like. And that's pretty much it. I'm already very happy with what I'm seeing. This is a very strong panel. This whole color panel where you can change hue, saturation, and luminance of all the different colors. This can be very handy at times. I'll show you that later. I quite like the colors here, so I don't really mind them, but you could, for example, just take the reds and change the hue. Notice the reds down in the that tape down there. That changes crazily, and that's pretty cool. You can also just take some of the saturation out if you don't want that red down there to be as visible. Just don't go overboard again, because you could very quickly ruin the colors. So these are very good for fine tuning. And quite often I want to say there's a lot of purple in stage lights, if they're cheap LED lights. So you can kind of rescue that by this one. We'll show that in the next example. But for this one, I'm already pretty happy. I think what all I want to do is actually just crop it to 16:9 like that, because there's a lot of like ceiling there I don't really need to see. Maybe I want to even crop it in a little bit, but not much. It's pretty damn cool. And then you could start to use the tools up here, the paint tools and stuff if you wanted to. I mean, you could sort of paint in a little bit of light up here if you want some of these lights to be a little bit more visible. That's just fine tuning. I mean, I'm already pretty happy with it. You can toy around with this stuff. You could clone out if you like the whiskey bottle, but I think it's really cool. But if you wanted it cloned out, you could do that. Apart from that, it is really lovely when you have an image like that, which really just is really nice out of camera. You don't have to do a lot to it. Of course, it's not always like that. Sometimes we get home with something like this. It's a small venue. It is super hazy, has LED lighting that when they hit the haze in this kind of really hazy small club, they get incredibly saturated and muddy, and LED lights only have a very, very narrow band of color. So you're just showering the whole scene with one specific color, on top of which LED lights can be tuned in different colors. But I mean, it can't actually produce like pure purple. It's just kind of blending it. It looks fine to the eye, but the camera is just going to see something completely different. So with this kind of scene, you got your work cut out for you, but you can land in something like this quite easily, where you tamed all the colors and you brought out more detail, and you kind of got away from this mega uber saturated look. Now, how do we do this? Well, first of all, if you're the lucky owner of a Fujifilm camera, I really recommend Classic Chrome, because as you can see, that is a very desaturated profile that does some of the work for you. But if you don't have that and you're just stuck with whatever color you have, you need to do a bit more work. Okay, let's start out with the white balance. Again, always do that first because it affects the entire image. And it's really, really blue, right? But if you warm it, you're obviously going to take some of that blue out. I mean, and then suddenly, yeah, that sort of orange red light that's hitting him, that's becoming very bright. But that's okay, we can fix that later. We just want to sort of take the blues down a little bit, somewhere in here. Let's try that. And then you go down here and you can sort of, maybe it's a little bit dark, we can have a little bit of more exposure to it. And I also want some clarity because it's very hazy and muddy. And now comes the real trick, because the vibrance slider is really good. It's sort of taken out this oversaturated stuff. And it does it better than the saturation slider, I find. I like the vibrance sliders. You can really just start to take that down, leave some color in. This might actually make a nice black and white image too, but let's pretend we have to do it in color. Now we've already really sort of, you know, rescued the image from this uber saturated, completely flat blue everywhere. We're starting to see sort of more details, and everything like this was so oversaturated as well. And if you go down, I'm just gonna add a little bit sort of contrast here. Maybe like this. I don't mind this to be kind of wacky, and it's a punk concert at a small venue. It's supposed to look really gritty. I don't like clean images anyway. But now we come to the important panel when you're doing this. This is where these really play, and they really can do great stuff. So, did I mention that there is a lot of purple in these LED lights? Look at what the purple slider does. And if I set it at 0, do you see purple? But there's so much purple in the blues and in everything. They just, I don't know, there's just evil purple coming out of LED lights. So if you change the hue of the purple, you're actually affecting a lot of the blues. And you can make it purple if you want, or you can kind of take it into more this sort of cyan look that I quite like. And if you do that to the blues as well, you're starting to nudge the blue into a more, what I find, pleasing level of blue. And you can do magenta. Try the magenta as well. It's like, oh, look at all that magenta. This LED light is apparently also spewing evil magenta. So try that and go, wow, look at that orange. It started to look more normal now. So now we're suddenly getting somewhere. So these hue things are massive tools in helping rescue these type of pictures. And we're pretty much there. Now I can just go like, I actually think it's still a little bit too saturated. Let's take it down a notch, like here. I'm starting to like it now. We got some nice sort of blues going, not too saturated, and a nice cyan, and we got a nice orange-brown thing going here from this crazy-ass light that's hitting him. I don't even know what color it's supposed to be. At the club, it's probably some kind of purple-orange thing. And that's why this is sort of, and you can change it even more here. But as you can see, the orange actually does nothing. Neither does the red. All of this primarily lives down in purple and magenta. Isn't that weird? But that's LED lighting for you. So you can tune this much nicer down here. And this is the important part. Changing the hue of the channels to combat, evil LED lighting. And of course now you can do more to the image, you can darken the stuff if you like and stuff. But as far as colors go, we've really rescued it. Because, I mean, let's go down here. Look where we started. That's how it looked at the beginning. And we ended up here. Now that was blue. What happens if it's red? Which is, for example, is in this club. It's very red. And again, LED lights, there are all kinds of weird colors. Not red, not actual red. But as you can tell, there's just so much stuff mixed together. And there's haze. And a digital camera, it looks red if you look at it with the eye, but not to a digital camera. So you get home with this and you go, sweet Lord, what are we gonna do? And you can basically do the same thing. So you probably don't want to warm it because this is going to get more red, right? But you could make it even colder. You go like, okay, let's try around here, like super cold. Let's try that to see what happens. Let's take the vibrance out, a lot of it. lot of it. Just take it all the way down. Look at that, you've already kind of rescued it. All you ever did was like change the white balance and the vibrance. And already you're starting to be at a level where you're working with more sort of shades, you have a lot more detail. It's not all burned out and horrible. And now we can add some curves to it. And we can go down to these sliders down here again. And you can start to change. I've obviously already toyed with them quite a lot. But you can change some of these if you like again. Like see the purple, see how much purple is in there. And the magenta. And that's the key. That is the way you get from the starting point. Is two things. Set the white balance, reduce the vibrance like crazy, and then play with the hues of the different color, because you're trying to get away from, as a final example, this massively purple overdose of colors. And by the way, sometimes it's funny. Like if you have something that's actually white, you can just like do that. And you go, okay, let's take that as a starting point, because it's at least it's kind of more neutral. Just to play with it, let's see what happens. Let's take the vibrance out. Yeah, that's not too bad. And then let's whack some contrast on there. It's also kind of like that. And I'm starting to like it now. It's starting to be, then the hues, it's like that purple. I don't really like that purple. It looks kind of weird. So we're just going to make it very cold, so it gets kind of bluish instead. And notice how it also kind of brings back some of the colors that was all purple before. Magenta. You could just go whack it back and forth and see what's it affecting. There's a lot of magenta in there too. Let's cool that as well. You can do the saturation bit. Let's try and do the blues, because I kind of like those to be sort of cyan as well. Also the luminance, by the way. Check this out. Luminance of the different colors. That can work really well too. Yeah, that's obviously not good. But again, if you just whack it back and forth, you can really see what it's affecting. So you take a little bit of the luminance of the purple out. You can take a little bit of the saturation of the purple out. Funny thing is, it gets brighter as you take out the saturation, because the way the digital colors work, like saturation, and they get darker. So you can actually kind of brighten it and take out the purples like this. And already, we're starting to have an image that can be rescued. And if we start out like that, it doesn't take that many clicks to get here. And now we're at a point where we have a reasonably neutral image and we can actually work with it. And that's basically it. That's my little tricks for doing colors in Lightroom. I really, really, really like when you have gorgeous light like this. I don't have to do a lot of stuff, but it's really good to know the tricks when you encounter something like these. And you need to go from this, I'm sure you've all been there, venues, mega oversaturated LED light and haze and stuff, and you can get it to this quite easily. So I hope that was useful. Shoot me any questions if you like, and see you next time.